My name is Graeme Smith, and I'm the author of The Dogs Are Eating Them Now, Our War in Afghanistan. I think I had originally envisioned this as more of a historical document in some ways. Some of my earlier drafts had more scraps of emails, had relied, I think, more heavily on just dialogue that I had recorded over the years. I saw it as a kind of chronological scrapbook of things. And of course that doesn't work very well once you actually write it out and see what a mess it is. And so my editors encouraged me to put a lot more of myself in there and to try to knit things together into more of a narrative, which I think was good advice. In some ways I learned how not to write a book. You should never ever do what I did, which is to sit down with 3 years of audio recordings and video and tens of thousands of photographs and a huge stack of notebooks, and try to wade your way through this material. It was hours and hours and hours of transcribing old conversations and staring with glassy eyes out the window of Dark Horse Coffee here in the East End of Toronto. It was incredibly inefficient. But what I was searching for were nuggets of scene and dialogue that might in themselves illuminate why Afghanistan was a debacle. Because I felt like the big structural analyses, these policy documents that I was reading didn't get inside the madness in the way that I wanted readers to get inside the madness. In some ways, the first half of the book reminds readers where we came from, because it's very easy to forget that when Canada went in there, southern Afghanistan was mostly peaceful. And so at the beginning I had to establish some of that baseline of describing the optimism that we could make sure that all the little girls of Kandahar go to school. And I think I mentioned in there somewhere about the plans for an electric trolley system in Kandahar and parklands and internet kiosks. And so it's only if you understand how hubristic we were, I think that you can understand how disappointed I feel personally, having watched all of those hopes unravel. I very briefly mentioned the Karzai government because in a lot of the rural parts of Afghanistan, Karzai's presence is hardly felt. Really, it was the local strongmen, the local players who dominated the scene. Asadullah Khalid gets a lot of attention in the book, and other tribal strongmen. We all held our breath when Melissa was captured, and it was a scary moment for all the Canadian journalists, not knowing what would happen to her. I mean, we were obviously really relieved when she got out, and she wrote her own excellent book about what happened. So I didn't want to dwell on that story too much, but actually that's just the tip of the iceberg. We had so many Afghan colleagues who suffered during that time as well. I remember especially Jojo. I don't think I put his name in there, actually. I should have, maybe, because it's a really terrible story. Jojo worked for CTV, and he was grabbed by the Americans and held without charge in a detention facility in Bagram in the north. And when he got out, he was a changed man. The Red Cross actually transferred him into my custody because they didn't know who to give him to. And he was rough when he came out. You could really see the effects of what had happened to him on his face. And then he was gunned down by unknown gunmen on the streets of Kandahar city. It was really hard as the years went by to maintain a contact list, which is just the basic job of a journalist, is to have a Rolodex. But my Rolodex was full of little notations beside the names, dead, dead, dead. And I wouldn't delete them. I would keep a hold of the phone numbers because the phone numbers would often be useful. There's a saying in Pashto, when the turban falls off the head, it lands on the shoulders. That is to say, the responsibilities of the father weigh heavily on the sons. And so I would call the same number, and some young man would pick up and say, "Oh, my father's been killed, but now I'm the new leader of the such and such tribe." And so yeah, it took a toll. Not only my sources disappeared, but good friends were killed and kidnapped. And I think that's partly why you're reading the book now and not 2 years ago, is because I was probably more screwed up than I realized when I left Kandahar. And it took some time to just sit with the material and think about it. Not think about it even so much as sort of feel my way through it. And so that's my excuse for being late with this. It was a really jarring experience after years in the hot, dusty Kandahar, to go through that airlock essentially and move back home for a little while and live in the east end of Toronto and just sitting in the Dark Horse coffee shop here on Queen Street, and then sometimes I'd go hide in Balzac's in the distillery because they don't have internet there, so it was easier to focus. I was just a lurker with a laptop. Probably people thought that I had music in my earbuds, but I didn't. I had gunfire and the sound of wind rustling through the poppy fields in my earphones as I was transcribing things. It brought me back to where I had been, and so it was weird to be sitting half here and half in Kandahar in some ways mentally. I think the great thing about these book prizes is that they really encourage folks like me who, I'm not sure if I want to be a writer, to think, okay, well, maybe this is something I can do. Maybe I won't quit my day job right away. But honestly, the process of writing the book had been so long and painful and gut-wrenching that I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it again. I really thought, okay, that's it. I'll go do something easier. But people seem to like it, so maybe I'll write another one.